Awesome. Yes, yes, yes. So I guess we can start. Thanks for everybody tuning in here, especially Ia, and as well as Islam, and also Miche. Thanks for being here. We're looking forward to talk today about carbon in more detail. So, Miche, thank you for the knowledge spill in advance. Maybe to start it off before we get into that, what is Menthol Protocol in short? Last week we had an AMA, but at short, Menthol Protocol allows every individual, organization, or community to tap in a transparent, verifiable, and customer engaging manner into high quality environmental projects, which are tokenized and can basically automate climate action into every economic transaction happening there. So yeah, that's it in very short. But let's maybe just discuss very shortly so we understand whom are we talking about as a customer. We have B2B in a special focus, especially Web3. So we're talking about entire networks and dApps, which we want to offset, as well as in every individual user wallet. But we're also having very interesting thoughts with big companies, non-Web3, which are, of course, interested in tapping in a automated and transparent and verifiable manner into environmental projects. So we're happy to offer through Menthol Protocol the high quality landscape of refi projects out there. One interesting thing coming up this month is the Next Block Expo. So with that, or after that, actually also our beta version 1 release. We're all working very hard towards that, and with a lot of joy though. So anybody coming to the Next Block Expo, we'll have a cool pool there, allowing every individual and organization being at the Next Block Expo or wanting to support the cause. They can basically offset their carbon footprint by donating into the cool pool. A shout out to Tom Copera, the founder of Next Block Expo, for giving us this lovely opportunity. We'll also have a panel discussion, a workshop, and a stand. So anybody in Berlin, please let us know. We'll love to have you there. But enough of the updates and summary of Menthol. Miche, how are you doing? Where are you tuning in from?
Good, good. Hi, everyone. I'm tuning in from Philly right now. Happy to be here.
Awesome, Miche. We know that you've got a lot currently going on. So thanks a lot very much for being here. And again, all the best wishes to your family.
Thank you. Thank you.
Miche, we want to talk about about a set of different interesting questions over here. And maybe if you don't mind, before jumping into those, can you describe what you do as a core contributor at Menthol Protocol? And then, of course, we'd like to understand what you do in general. Yeah, so we approached you as a expert out there in the carbon market. Please let us know what you do as a core contributor at Menthol, as a small starter, and how you got into refi.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. And so, what do I do in Menthol is really focusing anywhere related to energy and environmental questions. So my background is in chemical engineering for my bachelor's, master's in environmental engineering, and then a lot of data science work behind that. So on the coding aspects as well. So what I do is I help everywhere and anywhere from product to tech on the coding side and implementing first of all, starting with CO2 methodologies for blockchain systems. So really coming in and helping on the technical and the product aspect, coming from oil and gas, aerospace, and tech industries by trade. And bringing in that expertise and helping out with the methodology space of what we're implementing, and then also helping with documentation and things like that. So definitely different in a startup life as opposed to coming from big corporate at top Fortune 500 companies. But very happy and very glad to be with the team, learning a lot every single day.
Awesome. Thanks, Loud Meet. And you didn't mention that you also do business development, right? So and we were together at
Yeah, I
that.
forgot about that. Yes, yes.
That was
We
such a
do it.
pleasure meeting you in real life. That
Yes, yeah, just also highlight on that. I mean, coming with learning in the startup space, only been in for about 2 months now here with Menthol, is that everyone wears many different hats, and what Amir was also mentioning is yes, talking with investors, collaborators, potential partnerships, etc., and using that business development acumen, and also helping with the marketing team. How do we distill? My job is to help provide some clarity on some different concepts that folks may not understand, and how do we distill those information into concepts for marketing or easily digest infographics, things like that.
awesome. Thanks a lot. And we are so happy to have you on board, Miche. Um, Having a function of an aggregator of the supply side of different impact tokens, it's just very important to also have an educated, um, yeah, a process for the demand side to choose high quality impact tokens. So we are very happy to have your expertise here on board and work on this together. So maybe I'll just jump into the first question, Miche. So what are carbon emissions?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the wording, right? Carbon emissions, you might hear ESG emissions, environmental impact, ecological footprint, etc. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they're not all the same. So if we just talk about carbon emissions, that is emissions that have the atom carbon in it, right? But the overall kind of landscape is if we take one step back and think about, okay, there's kind of four different terms that are interchangeably used, but they're all a little bit different. So greenhouse gases is one thing. CO2, so carbon dioxide, is one type of greenhouse gas, but there are many different greenhouse gases, and they can all be measured in something called CO2 equivalents. And then specifically carbon emissions. So not all greenhouse gases are carbon emissions. Most of them are. Most of what folks hear are CO2 equivalent emissions, but not all of them have a carbon related atom to it. There are other greenhouse gases that do not have carbon constituents in them.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Miche. To go one step further or like to have a better understanding, the next question, um, why are carbon emissions a problem?
Yeah, so in general, carbon emissions, I would take it one step further from there. And the question would be, let's say, why are greenhouse gases a problem? And why are greenhouse gases? So carbon emissions, let's say CO2 emissions, is a problem. Methane is a problem. We'll get into those in more depth in a second. But in general, if the question is, why are greenhouse gases a problem? Is because each type of greenhouse gas has something called a global warming potential, right? And that is an index of how much would it affect the ozone layer. So each type of greenhouse gas has a certain global warming potential, and those are calculated, etc. And those have an impact to the ozone layer and generally the atmosphere.
Thanks a lot, Miche. Just to reflect again, so we've got this global climate crisis going on. We know that there's a two-step approach to it. We have to reduce our carbon footprint through efforts, and the second step is actually offsetting the remaining bad environmental impact you have through, for example, purchasing carbon credits, biodiversity credits, renewable energy credits. So just to have a more basic understanding over here again, what are the four main greenhouse gases in general, which we want to take a look at when like pursuing our offsetting
Yeah.
to create climate action?
Yeah. So if we think about, I think, and everyone please do their homework here, but I think there are a total of 10 in total greenhouse gases. Now, most of which do not apply to when we talk about carbon offsetting, etc. What primarily is discussed in blockchain systems is the CO2 emissions that is emitted from the power generation that is used to create electricity. So primarily the CO2 emissions. Sometimes there may be there's some methane and nitrous oxide that is created during power generation, but primarily those emissions are from carbon dioxide itself. So that's what we typically talk about. I would say there's again 3 main greenhouse gases here. If we're talking about blockchain systems, if we want to get into the nitty gritty, it's CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide. However, most of the emissions come from power generation, and that's the CO2.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mietje. So what causes the most carbon emission, and how does that compare to blockchain technology?
So what is so if we just say in the world, what contributes most to CO2 emissions? So let's say CO2 equivalents, okay? So overall greenhouse gases. There's reports in EPA. You can also look in IEA, etc. A lot of which come from industry and transportation. Now, if you look at if you look at a pie chart and you see industry, sometimes folks can ask the question of, okay, well, what industries? Is it oil and gas? Is it concrete? Is it petrochemical, etc.? There's a lot of data and information in EPA and IEA, but it really depends on what the question you're asking and how do you slice and dice. But from an overall perspective, it's coming from industry and transportation.
Thanks a lot. I'll continue with the next question. What is carbon removal?
So there's carbon removal, carbon reduction, avoidance, and these are all different topics here, but specifically for removal is typically thought of when you're directly removing CO2 from the atmosphere. So sometimes there are concepts called direct air capture, and that's one method of carbon removal. But again, carbon removal in general is removing CO2 almost directly from the air, and that's carbon removal. Reduction is when you already have your CO2 footprint, and maybe you want to reduce by fuel switching, or you want to reduce by bringing more other kinds of scope 2 emissions from renewable sources. But that gets into the nitty gritties of, okay, is this avoidance versus reduction versus removal? But again, removal is when you're taking CO2 directly out of the atmosphere.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mietje. I thought maybe I'll just say hello to the new people who have joined. If you have any question, if you'd like to ask Mietje something specifically as a carbon expert, please do so. Just raise your hand and we'll be happy to attend to your questions as well. So hello, Mo. Hello, Gürkay, ITech, Jack, CryptoFire, and Decentral. Lovely having you join in. I'll continue with the next question, namely, what is carbon offsetting and why is it important?
So carbon offsetting, let me think in terms of how to say it in a descriptive way, because I think also folks see RECs, so renewable energy credits, and I think it's important to explain the two. So carbon offsets and renewable energy credits, or RECs, are financial instruments to help for accounting. So carbon offsets in general are used to reduce direct global emissions, whereas renewable energy credits are used to manage indirect emissions. So if you think about, okay, well, what does indirect emissions versus global or versus direct emissions? Indirect emissions usually are scope 2 emissions, and direct emissions are scope 1 emissions. And so in general, really offsets and RECs, they're just financial tools to quantify those that can be traded, etc. But in terms of what kind of emissions, when you talk about greenhouse gas accounting, etc., they're usually described in scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3 emissions. And again, RECs are used to really manage indirect emissions, whereas carbon offsets is used to reduce direct global emissions.
Awesome, thanks for elaborating here. So the next question is, what are carbon credits and how do they work?
So for carbon credits, so there's a difference, right, between a credit and an offset. If you think about a credit card, you are given a limit. You are allowed to use up to X amount. So a carbon credit, I would have to do a little bit more background here, but when it comes to carbon credits, they may be issued by regulatory entities, etc. But think about a credit versus an offset. A credit, if you think about your credit card, you have a limit. You're allowed to emit up to X amount of a limit, and that's a carbon credit. Those are usually purchased. Offsets are also a financial market, but those are backed. Sorry, it's a financial tool. So an offset is backed, and it should be backed by a high quality project that is supposed to be either removing, reducing, or avoiding emissions. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense there.
No, thanks a lot, Miche. Awesome. We have quite a few questions, so and I think it's quite interesting to understand in more depth what the underlying topics are around refi. So I'll just go through them quickly. The next question we have over here is there a difference between carbon credits and carbon offsetting?
Yeah, so sorry, I actually went a little bit in detail there, and I just explained it. So just to reiterate, carbon credits, imagine if you have think about just financial tools, okay? You have carbon credits. It is something that you pay for or something that an entity pays for and says, emit up to X amount or a limit of carbon. And that is a carbon credit. A carbon offset, you also need to pay for a carbon offset, right? It's still a transaction of money to purchase that. But a carbon offset is backed by, and should be backed by, a project that is either removing, reducing, or avoiding carbon emissions. And that is represented in an offset.
Miche, thanks again for allowing me to ask again here. So the very important takeaway over here is that this is kind of the most powerful solution we have to basically compensate for our carbon footprint, for our non-avoidable carbon footprint, which we will need and have also if we put all efforts in reducing our carbon footprint. So it's just so important to understand that the significance of this carbon credit market. So this brings us to the next question, actually. What is a carbon market?
Yeah, so think about where these financial entities of carbon can be purchased, right? So think of not more or less a marketplace, but an entity where these carbon offsets could be purchased. It is a little bit different for carbon credits. I would need to do a little bit more research on that because I think that's done more through regulatory or permitting efforts as opposed to an open market. There's also, when it comes to the carbon market, there's two types of markets, right? a lot of things that you see on the internet maybe now is around the voluntary carbon market, so the VCM. But prior to that, and it may merge, is that there's also the compliance carbon market. So that's more from the regulatory entity side.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Miche. So the next question over here is, what is your take on greenwashing, and how do you think blockchain technology can solve this problem?
Mm-hmm. So I'll stick with facts rather than opinion, because when it comes to greenwashing, I believe there are definitions around it, and Gold Standard actually has a definition on what is greenwashing and how common is it. So just think about greenwashing in sum from this note is that it is when an entity selectively discloses, basically saying that they're going to be more environmentally friendly, but is not backed by actual quality credits, or is not backed by actual quality information. So it's more of a deceiving tactic. So really means if they're advertising positive information regarding a product's environmental performance, but they're hiding the negative aspects, right? And they're not being transparent. So that's in sum what greenwashing is. One of the ways that I think blockchain technology is to help maybe solve this problem is that everything is in a more or less immutable system. So the information is in an immutable system. I think sometimes folks may say that blockchain is transparent. The answer is yes, blockchain is transparent if you know how to find the information, right? So I think really here is what blockchain technology and helps with the carbon markets, etc., is that you're able to retire these credits. You're able to see these credits in a immutable way, and it's all on this technology that's more in a trusted system.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Miche, for answering all of those questions. Indeed, also looking at the different investments taking place in companies tokenizing impact tokens, maybe carbon credits or renewable energy credits, we see that the advantages which are being promised are like based on the current status of how you can actually buy those credits now. And also here we've got Mo on board. So Mo being CTO of BlockZ, basically the sister or mother company of Menthol Protocol. They went through the process of actually trying to buy those very important and crucial carbon credits, renewable energy credits, to offset companies' carbon footprint, to basically work towards solving the climate crisis and taking individual responsibility. But the process was really cumbersome, and there are like different like problems arising with it. So before you actually purchase carbon credits, you first have to calculate them. So I'm just like rounding up a little bit the story of Menthol Protocol, and also the advantages of Web3 coming in, and why we at Regenerative Finance, at the ReFi folks, believe that ReFi can be an important factor for the next bull run of crypto. There's like a huge acceleration potential between crypto and climate. Before jumping into that, so what are the current problems? It's quite inaccessible, those different credits. It takes a lot of time and effort to calculate. There are no standards there to know what is your carbon footprint actually, what do you want to offset. And there's the trust issue of greenwashing, which you explained. So blockchain offers those advantages of a trustless system, as you described, or having those characteristics, also depending on what information is there, right? And having that in a verifiable manner. But also it brings into a market with no price discovery, with over-the-counter deals, having no liquidity there. So those advantages of Web3, which are namely liquidity, automation, security, they basically help this carbon credit market, this very important piece in fighting climate crisis, to be more efficient. And one interesting part of Web3 is generally the aspect of tokenization. So you now have a programmable unit which represents an environmental project, which you can integrate into each product offering. So me coming from a marketing perspective, I see like so many different beautiful ways of integrating that. And also at Menthol, we don't only want to offer any organization or individual transparent and verifiable climate action, but actually at a very customer engaging way. So yeah, Miche, thanks a lot for jumping into all of those different questions. Here, like a small roundup on the Web3 influences at the end. Do you have any point, Miche, you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I think one other note, I was thinking more from on the technical side and like the validity of the carbon projects, etc., that can be helped with blockchain, but really it's also being able to scale the financial component. And just like you were mentioning too, right, from a tokenization perspective, a little bit of some of my background is coming from also from environmental permitting and compliance. So if you think about just from a permitting perspective and you think about, okay, how is that analogous to if someone wanted to buy an offset without the voluntary carbon market helped by Web3, then someone or an entity would need to fill out paperwork to do so. And it's a very manual process, one, and it also takes a lot of time to do so. So the core thing also with Web3 and blockchain systems to help with this is what Amir was saying, and I think it's really important to stress that these projects can be brought on chain and that it's able to be scalable and also liquidity, right? Being able to have access to purchase those on chain in the system as opposed to an on paper or government entity database registry, right? So thanks for sharing that, Amir, but I just wanted to reiterate that point. It really depends on what angle you talk from, whether it's financial or the technical validity of the projects, but it's really, again, from the blockchain and Web3 side of things, it's able to integrate those two together. And that's what's really powerful about blockchain.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Miche. I was just having the thought that it's such like we're working on an international problem, right? But also in a very interdisciplinary field. So it's just such an exciting and complex field. But it's funny, like what Menthol Protocol's core value proposition is allowing any individual and organization to create an account and to offset their historical and future carbon footprint with a few clicks. So breaking down this whole complexity and just creating a user account, accessing those tokenized projects in such an easy way as we intend to do. I think that's just, yeah, exciting. So I'm really looking forward to our beta version 1 release. Yeah, I think I don't have any other question. Maybe someone else from the audience has a question.
Yeah, please let us know if you have any questions.
If not, we'll be happy to, yeah, maybe latest on Friday, hear you in the next Twitter space. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you. And goodbye.
Bye, everyone.